The city pulsed with life, a chaotic symphony of honking horns, distant sirens, and the hum of people rushing to their destinations. Towering skyscrapers gleamed in the sunlight, their glass facades reflecting wealth and progress. But just blocks away, crumbling buildings stood like forgotten relics, their walls marked by graffiti and neglect. Here, the air carried a different weight, heavy with struggle and resilience. The contrast was stark. On one side, privilege flourished. On the other, survival was an everyday battle. Marcus Johnson adjusted his tie as he walked down the bustling street, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. He moved with purpose, every step deliberate, but beneath his confident exterior lay scars that no amount of success could erase. His mind often wandered back to the days when hope felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. Those memories, still, haunted him, shaping the man he had become, a fierce advocate for justice who refused to let anyone silence his voice. "Dad," Marcus whispered under his breath, the word carrying the weight of decades-old pain. He remembered the night they came for his father, uniformed men banging on their door, dragging him away without explanation. Marcus had been only 10 years old then, watching helplessly as his hero disappeared into the system. It wasn't until years later that he learned the truth. His father had been wrongfully arrested, a victim of racial profiling. That injustice ignited a fire within Marcus, fueling his determination to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Officer Daniel Grayson leaned casually against his patrol car, sipping coffee from a styrofoam cup. To some, he might have seemed like any other officer doing his job, but there was something about him, an arrogance that lingered in the way he carried himself, the way he spoke to people. His uniform gave him power, and he wielded it recklessly, unbothered by the consequences. Years of unchecked bias had hardened him, convincing him that certain individuals were inherently guilty simply because of the color of their skin. Grayson's eyes narrowed as he spotted Marcus walking briskly toward his sleek sedan. Something about the man set him on edge. Perhaps it was the tailored suit, or maybe it was the quiet confidence in his stride. Either way, Grayson decided this was someone worth stopping. Flipping on his lights, he pulled up behind Marcus's car, cutting off his path. Marcus froze, gripping the steering wheel tightly. He knew what this was. He didn't need to turn around to feel the weight of unwarranted suspicion pressing down on him. Taking a deep breath, he rolled down his window and forced a calm tone. "Is there a problem, officer?" Grayson approached slowly, his hand resting on his holster. "License and registration," he demanded, his voice laced with authority. "Of course," Marcus replied, reaching carefully into his glove compartment. He handed over the documents, making sure to keep his movements slow and deliberate. "I'm not sure why I've been pulled over. I haven't broken any laws." Grayson glanced at the papers, sneering slightly. "We'll see about that." His gaze shifted to Marcus, scrutinizing him as if searching for confirmation of his own biases. "This your car?" "Yes, it's mine," Marcus said firmly, pointing to the registration. "You can verify it if you'd like," but Grayson wasn't listening. Instead, he leaned closer, his tone mocking. "Fancy ride for a guy like you. How'd you afford something like this? Work hard enough to earn it, or did you take shortcuts?" The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He clenched his jaw, fighting the urge to lash out. This wasn't the first time he'd faced such disrespect, but each encounter chipped away at his patience. Still, he reminded himself of the bigger picture, the countless others who wouldn't get the chance to defend themselves. For them, he had to stay composed. "I don't think my financial situation is relevant here," Marcus said evenly. "If there's no issue with my documentation, I'd appreciate being allowed to leave." Grayson smirked, clearly enjoying the power dynamic. "Not so fast. Step out of the vehicle." Marcus hesitated, his heart pounding. He knew where this was heading. Despite his accomplishments, despite everything he'd worked for, None of it mattered in moments like these. All that remained was the color of his skin, and the prejudices it invoked. As he stepped onto the curb, hands raised in surrender, Marcus felt a wave of humiliation wash over him. Passers-by started, their expressions ranging from indifference to pity. Each glance reinforced the dehumanization he endured, stripping away his dignity piece by piece. Judge Evelyn Carter sat in her chambers, reviewing case files late into the evening. She prided herself on fairness, always striving to rise above the flaws of the system she served. Yet even she couldn't deny the constraints placed upon her by societal expectations and institutional biases. Her role was delicate, balancing justice with compromise, and she often wondered how much longer she could bear the burden. When news of Marcus's arrest reached her desk, she felt a pang of unease. She recognized his name immediately. He was known for taking on cases others deemed impossible, challenging the status quo with relentless determination. If anyone deserved impartiality, it was him. But she also knew the odds were stacked against him, just as they were against so many others. Back on the street, Marcus stood silently as Grayson rifled through his belongings, searching for evidence that didn't exist. Every insult, every dismissive remark, fueled a growing anger within him. This wasn't just about him. It was about every person who'd ever been treated as less than human because of the color of their skin. "You think you're better than me?" Grayson taunted, tossing Marcus's wallet onto the hood of the car. "You think your fancy degree makes you untouchable?" Marcus met his gaze, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "I don't think I'm better than anyone. But I do know this. You're proving exactly why we need change." Grayson scoffed, but the comment struck a nerve. Deep down, he knew Marcus was right, and that knowledge frightened him more than anything else. Hours later, Marcus finally walked away from the ordeal, shaken but resolute. The injustice of the night burned in his chest, igniting a resolve stronger than ever before. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. As he climbed into his car and drove home, he made a silent promise. He would use this experience to expose the cracks in the system, to demand accountability, and to inspire others to rise above the hatred that sought to divide them. For now, the fight continued. But Marcus knew one thing for certain. Resilience was born in the face of adversity, and authenticity was the most powerful weapon of all. Marcus sat alone in his dimly lit office, the faint hum of the city outside barely registering. His hands trembled slightly as he stared at the empty legal pad before him. The arrest had shaken him more than he cared to admit. For years, he'd prided himself on being a beacon of change, a fighter for justice who could navigate the broken system and still come out swinging. But now, doubt crept in like an unwelcome shadow. What was the point of all his work if even he wasn't safe? He clenched his fists, trying to push away the anger that threatened to consume him. "How can I keep fighting when the system doesn't care?" he muttered under his breath. His voice cracked with frustration, betraying the storm inside. He thought about his father again, the man who'd taught him to stand tall no matter what, and felt a pang of guilt. Hadn't his father endured worse without losing hope? Yet, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this time was different. This time, it felt personal. His phone buzzed on the desk, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from a colleague. "We need to talk about how this is affecting your reputation." Marcus sighed heavily, tossing the phone aside. Reputation. Was that all anyone cared about? He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Did his degrees, his suits, his courtroom victories truly protect him? Or did they make him more of a target? Success wasn't supposed to feel like a double-edged sword, but here he was, questioning whether it made any difference at all. By morning, news of the arrest had spread like wildfire. Colleagues called, some offering support, others whispering behind closed doors. Clients began canceling meetings, their trust eroded by baseless rumors. Marcus overheard snippets of conversations in the hallway, comments about how this kind of thing happens, or how he must have done something wrong. Each word stung, cutting deeper than he expected. Even those who claimed to stand with him seemed hesitant, their solidarity tinged with doubt. At the precinct, Officer Grayson typed furiously on his computer, crafting a report filled with lies. He described Marcus as aggressive, uncooperative, even dangerous. The words flowed easily, almost reflexively, as though truth were irrelevant. Grayson knew the system would protect him. It always did. As long as people feared rocking the boat, nothing would change. He smirked to himself, confident that his version of events would hold up. After all, who would believe a black man over? A decorated officer? Outside, the streets buzzed with activity. Protesters gathered outside the precinct holding signs that read, "Justice for Marcus," and "No more lies." Their chants echoed through the air, a powerful reminder of the community's outrage. Among them was Tasha, a young woman, clutching a photo of her brother. Her eyes burned with determination as she spoke into a megaphone. "This isn't just about one man," she declared. "It's about every person who's been silenced, dismissed, or killed because of the color of their skin." Marcus watched the protests unfold on TV, his heart swelling with both pride and unease. Some outlets portrayed him as a victim of systemic racism, while others painted him as reckless and confrontational. The divide was stark, highlighting how narratives could be twisted to suit agendas. He turned off the screen, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. Later that evening, Marcus met with Mr. Thompson, his mentor, in a quiet corner of a coffee shop. The older man listened intently as Marcus poured out his frustrations. When he finished, Mr. Thompson placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Son, you're not fighting for perfection," he said gently. "You're fighting for progress. Don't let them steal your fire." Tasha approached Marcus after the protest, her voice trembling but resolute. "My brother died because of men like Grayson," she said. "He deserves justice, and so do you." Her story reignited something. In Marcus, a spark of purpose he thought he'd lost. He nodded, promising to help her seek accountability. But as Marcus returned home that night, his phone buzzed once more. This time, it was a text from an unknown number. "Drop the lawsuit, or else." His blood ran cold, yet a strange calm settled over him. Threats weren't new, but this one carried weight. Still, Marcus knew what he had to do. Fear wouldn't stop him. Not this time. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension, a palpable weight pressing down on everyone present. Marcus stood at the podium, his hands steady despite the storm raging inside him. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been dismissed, degraded, or destroyed by a system that refused to see them as human. He glanced around the room, taking in the faces of those who had come to witness this moment. Supporters, skeptics, and even a few hostile stares. Each one reminded him why he couldn't afford to falter now. As the judge called for order, Marcus took a deep breath. "Your Honor," he began, his voice strong but measured. "This case is not merely about an unlawful arrest. It's about exposing the lies that perpetuate injustice and dismantling the biases that allow such abuses to persist." His words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. For years he'd fought against systemic racism from the sidelines. Today, he would face it head-on. When it was his turn to testify, Marcus stepped forward, his eyes locking onto the jury. He spoke clearly, recounting the events of that night with precision. "Officer Grayson approached me without cause, questioned my identity, and then fabricated a narrative to justify his actions," he said, his tone unwavering. "But this isn't just about me. It's about the countless others who've endured similar treatment because of their race." He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in before continuing. Systemic racism doesn't operate in isolation. It thrives on unchecked power, fear-mongering, and the willingness of institutions to protect themselves rather than the people they're meant to serve. The courtroom fell silent, the weight of his testimony reverberating through the space. Grayson shifted uncomfortably in the witness box, sweat beading on his forehead as Marcus began his cross-examination. "You claim I was aggressive that night?" Marcus asked, leaning slightly forward. "Can you describe exactly what I did to provoke such aggression?" Grayson hesitated, his usual bravado wavering. You were argumentative," he stammered. "Argumentative," Marcus repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Or was it simply inconvenient for you to encounter someone who dared to question your authority?" He pressed further, dissecting Grayson's story piece by piece until the cracks became impossible to ignore. With each pointed question, Grayson's facade crumbled, revealing the prejudice beneath. At one point, Marcus leaned in closer, his voice cutting like steel. "Tell me, Officer Grayson, when you looked at me that night, did you see a man? Or did you see a stereotype?" The courtroom held its collective breath as Grayson fumbled for an answer, unable to meet Marcus's piercing gaze. The emotional crescendo came when Marcus recounted his father's wrongful arrest. His voice softened, trembling with vulnerability as he described the pain of watching his hero dragged away in handcuffs. "I was 10 years old," he said, his words heavy with emotion. "And I promised myself I'd spend my life fighting, so no child would have to feel that kind of helplessness again." Tears glistened in the eyes of several jurors, and even Judge Carter seemed visibly moved. The connection between Marcus's personal trauma and the broader struggle for justice resonated deeply, transforming the courtroom into a space of shared humanity. Judge Carter addressed the court with uncharacteristic fervor. "What we've witnessed here is not just misconduct, it's a failure of duty," she declared, her voice ringing with authority. "Law enforcement exists to protect and serve, yet time and again, we see evidence of bias and abuse go unchecked. This cannot continue." Her words carried the weight of decades of frustration, demanding accountability not only from Grayson, but from the entire system he represented. The jury deliberated for hours, their absence stretching the tension to its breaking point. When they finally returned, the four persons stood and announced the verdict, in favor of Marcus Johnson. Gasps rippled through the gallery as relief washed over Marcus's face. The judge ordered punitive damages against Grayson and the department, a small but significant step toward reform. Though the victory felt monumental, Marcus knew it was only one battle in a much larger war. That evening, Marcus received another message. This time, a chilling threat targeting Tasha. His heart sank. As he read the words, his mind racing with possibilities. "They'll stop at nothing to silence us," he murmured, clutching the phone tightly. Determined to protect her, he arranged for additional security while vowing to keep pushing forward. Justice demanded sacrifice, and he was prepared to make it. Despite the lingering danger, hope flickered brightly in the aftermath of the trial. Supporters gathered outside the courthouse chanting slogans of resilience and unity. Marcus joined them briefly, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in days, he allowed himself to believe that change was possible. The victory may have been symbolic, but symbols had power, and this one would fuel the fight for generations to come. Marcus sat in his office, the quiet hum of the city filtering through the open window. The trial was over, but its echoes lingered in every corner of his life. He felt different, lighter yet heavier all at once. Lighter because he had fought and won, proving that justice could still be claimed even against overwhelming odds. Heavier because the battle had left scars, reminders of how far society still needed to go. He picked up a framed photo of his father, running his thumb along the edges. "I did it, Dad," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. But this isn't just about me anymore. A spark ignited within him, a realization that true empowerment wasn't found in personal victories alone. It lay in lifting others, in inspiring them to rise above the hatred and fear that sought to divide them. For Marcus, the trial wasn't an endpoint. It was a beginning. Tasha knocked softly on the doorframe, pulling him from his thoughts. She held a notebook clutched tightly to her chest, her expression a mix of determination and uncertainty. "Can we talk?" she asked hesitantly. "Of course," Marcus replied, gesturing for her to sit. "What's on your mind?" "I want to do what you do," Tasha said, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. "I want to fight, not just for my brother, but for everyone who can't fight for themselves." Marcus smiled, pride swelling in his chest. "Then let's get to work. You're not just carrying your brother's memory. You're carrying the hope of everyone who's ever been silenced. Together, we'll make sure their voices are heard." Across the nation, conversations erupted like wildfire. News outlets replayed clips of the trial, dissecting every moment where truth triumphed over lies. Social media buzzed with hashtags calling for reform, and protests sprang up in cities large and small. People marched with signs bearing Marcus's name alongside those of countless others who had suffered under systemic racism. Lawmakers scrambled to propose legislation addressing police misconduct, while community leaders demanded transparency and accountability. In coffee shops, classrooms, and living rooms, discussions unfolded about privilege, bias, and the urgent need for change. The ripple effect of Marcus's case stretched far beyond the courtroom, sparking a collective awakening. For the first time in years, many dared to believe that progress was possible, even if it required relentless effort. Meanwhile, Grayson faced a reckoning of his own. Stripped of his badge and ostracized by former colleagues, he became a cautionary tale, a symbol of unchecked prejudice brought low by public scrutiny. Reporters hounded him for interviews, eager to dissect his downfall, but he remained silent, unable or unwilling to confront the damage he'd caused. At a press conference announcing the disciplinary action taken against Grayson, Marcus stood. Before reporters, his presence commanding yet compassionate. "This is not about revenge," he said firmly. "It's about accountability. One man's mistakes reflect deeper systemic issues that must be addressed. Let this serve as a reminder that no one is above justice. Not today, not ever." Ew. Crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing the sentiment shared by millions watching from afar. Though the road ahead remained fraught with challenges, moments like these offered glimmers of hope, a testament to the power of persistence and courage. On a crisp autumn morning, Marcus stepped onto a stage erected in the heart of the city. Thousands gathered around, their faces reflecting a mosaic of emotions: anger, grief, hope, and resolve. As he adjusted the microphone, the noise subsided, replaced by an expectant hush. "When I was a child," Marcus began, his voice resonating across the crowd, "I watched my father taken away simply because of the color of his skin. That injustice shaped me, it broke me, but it also taught me something invaluable: resilience. Resilience isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up, again and again, until the world sees your humanity." His words struck a chord, drawing murmurs of agreement from the audience. We stand here today not because we've won the war, but because we refuse to give up the fight. Racism thrives when we stay silent, but when we speak, when we act, when we stand together, we remind the world that love is stronger than hate. As he concluded, the crowd erupted into chants of solidarity, their voices rising like a tidal wave. Marcus stepped back, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. In that moment, he knew the movement was bigger than any one person. It belonged to everyone willing to carry the torch. Later that evening, Tasha approached Marcus, her eyes shining with purpose. "I've decided," she said confidently. "I'm going to law school. I want to dedicate my life to fighting for justice. Just like you." Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, his pride evident. "You're already doing that, Tasha. Remember, this isn't just about careers, it's about hearts. Keep yours strong and you'll inspire others to do the same." Her decision marked a turning point, a passing of the baton to a new generation, committed to dismantling the walls of prejudice. Hope bloomed in her resolve, a seed planted by Marcus's unwavering belief in the possibility of change. Days turned into weeks, and Marcus's words continued to resonate throughout the city. They were shared in classrooms, quoted in speeches, and scrawled on protest signs. His message of unity and resilience reminded people that transformation began with collective effort, an unyielding commitment to standing up, speaking out, and refusing to back down. Yet, as Marcus walked through the bustling streets, he couldn't ignore the lingering weight of unfinished business. Victory in court hadn't erased centuries of inequality. It had merely scratched the surface. The fight against racism wasn't a sprint. It was a marathon, requiring patience, perseverance, and unity. He paused outside a mural depicting faces, of those lost to injustice, their stories woven into the fabric of resistance. Placing a hand on the cool brick, he whispered, "We're not done yet." And with that, he stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next, for himself, for Tasha, and for everyone counting on him to lead the way. Marcus stood at the edge of the crowd, his heart pounding as he watched Tasha take the stage. Her voice trembled but carried strength as she spoke about her brother's death and the justice they were fighting for. He felt a surge of pride mixed with responsibility. This was why he endured. Change doesn't happen alone, Marcus thought, clenching his fists. Each victory, like the trial against Grayson, was fleeting if not built upon. The threats still came, the system still resisted, but every small step mattered. Tasha's courage reminded him that resilience wasn't solitary. It was shared. As cheers erupted around him, Marcus realized this fight would outlive him. It had to. For every Tasha inspired, there were others waiting to rise. His role wasn't just to lead, but to ignite, a spark in each person to carry forward. If this story resonates with you, please like, share, and subscribe to join the movement for change. Together, we can ensure these voices are heard and these stories inspire action. Because the fight isn't over, and neither is our hope. "We're not done yet," he whispered again, turning away from the mural. The city buzzed with hope, fragile yet alive. Tomorrow he'd return to the courtroom, the streets, and the fight. Because even when progress felt distant, standing still wasn't an option. Not anymore.